My name is Audrey, and at 28 years old, I thought I had successfully buried my identity as a piano prodigy, along with the crushing expectations of my mother. For years, I lived as the family disappointment while my sister Cassandra basked in perfection. Then came the announcement that changed everything. During Cassandra's wedding planning, my mother smiled that familiar cold smile and said, "Audrey will provide some background music during cocktail hour." Not a request, a statement. Little did she know that forcing me back to the piano would be her biggest mistake. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have been your biggest supporter. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. I first touched piano keys when I was 4 years old. My small fingers somehow knew exactly where to go, as if the instrument had been waiting for me. By 6, I was playing pieces most adults struggled with. My mother, Judith, had been a decent pianist herself in her youth, but marriage and children had cut her aspirations short. When she discovered my talent, her eyes lit up with a fervor that should have warned me. "This one has the gift," she told everyone, at church, at school functions, at family gatherings. "Audrey is going to be the concert pianist I always knew we needed in this family." My childhood consisted of 4 hours of practice daily, even on weekends and holidays. While other kids played outside, I sat on the bench, my mother hovering behind me with a timer and a wooden ruler she occasionally used to tap my wrists when my posture slipped. My sister Cassandra was 3 years older, and as average at music as she was, exceptional at everything else. Cassandra was the golden child, beautiful and sociable, with perfect grades and impeccable manners. She played volleyball, became class president, and dated the quarterback. She followed rules and fulfilled expectations. I, on the other hand, only had the piano. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the refrain of my youth. Cassandra knows how to present herself. Cassandra doesn't need to be reminded to smile. My father, George, remained largely absent from these dynamics. A corporate attorney who traveled frequently, he seemed relieved to let my mother handle the children. On the rare occasions he witnessed her harsh methods, he would furrow his brow but ultimately retreat to his study with a muted, "Listen to your mother, Audrey." The pivotal moment came when I was 16. I had qualified for the National Young Pianist Competition, an event my mother had been preparing me for since I was 10. The weeks leading up to it were brutal. 6 hours of practice daily, restricted diet, no social interactions that might distract me. "This is your moment," my mother said. "This is what we've sacrificed everything for." The weight of those words crushed me as I walked onto the stage. Under the bright lights, seeing the judges with their stern faces and my mother in the front row, her expression a mixture of hunger and demand, something inside me shattered. My fingers trembled above the keys, and when I began Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, I faltered. Notes that had flowed effortlessly in practice now stumbled from my fingers. Halfway through, I stopped completely, staring at my hands as if they belonged to someone else. The silence in that auditorium was deafening. I looked up to see my mother's face, a mask of fury and humiliation. Without finishing, I stood, bowed mechanically, and walked off stage. In the car afterward, my mother didn't speak a single word. When we arrived home, she looked at me and said, "I've wasted 12 years of my life on you." That night, I decided I was done with piano. I would finish high school, go to college for something practical, and never touch those ivory keys again. Music had become synonymous with failure and disappointment. And I succeeded, mostly. I went to state university, majored in accounting, and secured a respectable job at a firm in the city. I lived 30 minutes from my parents but visited infrequently. When I did, my mother rarely acknowledged my career achievements, instead making pointed references to wasted potential and throwing away natural gifts. Cassandra, meanwhile, had continued her trajectory of perfection. After graduating from an Ivy League school, she'd landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm, where she met Richard, the son of the company's founder. Richard came from old money, had connections throughout high society, and had proposed with a diamond that required its own zip code. My mother nearly burst with pride. "Can you imagine?" She told everyone who would listen, "Cassandra will be a Hamilton. She'll live in that beautiful neighborhood on Westbrook Hill." The engagement sent my mother into a frenzy of planning. The wedding would be the social event of the season, with over 300 guests, including judges, politicians, and even a minor European royal my mother had somehow discovered was distantly connected to Richard's family. I watched from the periphery as wedding discussions dominated every family dinner. My achievements remained invisible while Cassandra's wedding took center stage. "Will you be bringing anyone to the wedding?" my mother asked during one such dinner, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "No," I replied, stabbing at my salad. My last relationship had ended 6 months prior, another casualty of my inability to open up emotionally. "Well, at least we won't have to pay for an extra plate," she said with a tight smile. "Those seafood towers Richard's mother insisted on are costing a fortune." Throughout it all, Cassandra floated above the drama, delegating most decisions to our mother while she focused on her career. Sometimes I caught her watching me with an unreadable expression, but we had grown so distant over the years that meaningful conversations seemed impossible. What nobody in my family knew was that, in my apartment, hidden in my spare bedroom closet under a pile of winter coats, sat a digital piano with headphones. On particularly bad days, when the pressure of living up to imaginary expectations became too much, I would play in secret, the music a private rebellion, a reminder of who I might have been in another life, under different circumstances, with different parents. But I never played for anyone. The music was mine alone, a secret identity I kept hidden from the world, especially from my mother, who had made it clear that if I wasn't going to be exceptional, I shouldn't bother at all. 3 months before the wedding, my mother organized a formal family dinner to finalize key details. The dining room in my parents' house had been transformed with floral arrangements that matched Cassandra's wedding colors. Place cards written in professional calligraphy marked our seats, and my mother had prepared a 5-course meal that she claimed was just a simple family dinner. Cassandra arrived with Richard, both looking immaculate after what was supposedly a full workday. Richard's family wealth was evident in his casual confidence and the way he complimented my mother's cooking with the practiced ease of someone who frequently dined at Michelin-starred restaurants. "We've secured the string quartet from the symphony," my mother announced over dessert, consulting her wedding planning binder. "They'll play during the ceremony and the first hour of the reception." "Sounds lovely," Richard's mother, Patricia, commented. She had joined us for this dinner, a sleek woman in her 60s, with perfectly styled silver hair and jewelry that whispered rather than shouted about its value. "And for the cocktail hour," my mother continued, turning her gaze to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "Audrey will provide piano music." The bite of chocolate cake in my mouth turned to ash. I swallowed hard, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me?" I managed. "You'll play the piano during cocktail hour," my mother repeated, as if stating something we had previously agreed upon. "It will add a personal touch, and it saves us the cost of additional musicians." Everyone at the table was looking at me. Richard seemed politely interested, Patricia curious, my father suddenly very focused on his dessert, and Cassandra, surprisingly, uncomfortable. "Mom, I haven't performed in over 10 years, I said carefully. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Nonsense." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "It's like riding a bicycle. Besides, it's just background music while people mingle and have drinks. Nothing complicated." "Background music," I repeated, the words stinging more than they should have. "I didn't know you played piano," Richard said, turning to me with genuine interest. Before I could respond, my mother jumped in. Audrey was quite good as a child. She had potential. Had potential. Past tense. The dismissal was so casual, so complete. "I actually can't," I said, finding my voice. "I'm sorry, but I haven't practiced in years. I would embarrass everyone. My mother's expression hardened. After everything we've invested in your lessons, years of driving you to competitions, thousands of dollars in tuition to that piano professor, you can't manage to play a few simple pieces for your sister's wedding? It's the least you could contribute. The table fell silent. Patricia looked down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable witnessing family tension. Richard cleared his throat and reached for his water glass. Judith, my father finally spoke up. If Audrey doesn't want to play, we shouldn't force her. It's fine, Cassandra interjected, surprising me. We can hire someone else. But my mother wasn't backing down. No, it's not fine. Everyone in this family is contributing to make this wedding special. I'm handling all the planning. Your father is paying a small fortune, and all I'm asking of Audrey is 1 hour of piano playing. 1 hour. She turned to me, her voice softening into something more dangerous than her anger. Unless, of course, you can't even do that much for your sister. I understand if you're still too traumatized by your failure at that competition to help your own family. And there it was, the perfect manipulation. My greatest shame leveraged against me, wrapped in concern, presented as a family obligation. To refuse now would confirm everything she believed about me, that I was selfish, incapable, a disappointment. I looked at Cassandra, hoping for some sisterly support, but she was examining her engagement ring, her expression closed off. My father had retreated entirely, studying his coffee cup as if it contained ancient mysteries. Fine, I said finally. I'll play for the cocktail hour. My mother's smile was triumphant. Wonderful. I'll have a list of appropriate pieces for you to prepare. Nothing too showy, of course, just pleasant background music. Yes, I agreed, my voice hollow, just background music. As the conversation moved on to floral arrangements and seating charts, I sat in silence, feeling 16 years old again, a puppet with my mother pulling the strings. After dinner, as I was preparing to leave, Cassandra caught me in the hallway. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. I looked at her, surprised by the first genuine moment between us in years. Yes, I do. You know how she is. Cassandra glanced toward the dining room where our mother was chatting with Patricia. I know, I'm sorry she put you on the spot like that. It's your wedding, I shrugged. Apparently, everyone has to contribute. For what it's worth, she hesitated. I remember how amazing you were. You could play circles around that string quartet she's hired. Before I could respond, our mother called for Cassandra, and the moment passed. I drove home that night with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, rage and humiliation battling inside me. The next morning, an email from my mother arrived with an attached document titled Appropriate Wedding Selections. It contained a list of bland, inoffensive pieces, the kind played in department store elevators. At the bottom, she had written, Remember, this is Cassandra's day. Please keep the music tasteful and unobtrusive. Unobtrusive. Background music. That's all I was to her now. A utilitarian addition to her perfect wedding tableau. Not even worth featuring. Just there to fill sonic space until the real celebration began. For days afterward, I cycled through emotions, from anger to resignation. I considered backing out, claiming illness or a work emergency, but the thought of the satisfaction my mother would take in my failure to follow through stopped me. Once again, I was trapped in her expectations, even when those expectations were for me to be mediocre. The digital piano in my closet came out of hiding the weekend after the dinner. I set it up in my living room, a space it had never occupied before, and stared at it like it was both an old friend and a dangerous adversary. The black and white keys seemed to watch me expectantly. When I finally sat down and placed my fingers on the keys, something unexpected happened. Rather than the dread I anticipated, I felt a small, familiar thrill. My fingers remembered what my conscious mind had tried to forget, and when I began to play a simple C major scale, it flowed with surprising ease. That first evening, I played for 3 hours straight, moving from scales to simple pieces I recalled from memory, gradually working up to more complex compositions. My technique was rusty, certainly, but the foundation remained solid, buried under years of neglect, but not destroyed. As I played Debussy's Clair de Lune, memories flooded back, not just of my mother's pressure, but of moments when music had been pure joy. I remembered the feeling of mastering a difficult passage, the rush of emotional connection to a piece that spoke directly to my soul. Those moments had existed alongside the trauma, though they had been overshadowed by it for so long. The next day, I pulled out my mother's suggested playlist and nearly laughed at its banality. Simplified versions of pop songs, watered-down classical pieces, uninspired wedding standards. This was what she thought of my abilities now, or perhaps what she wanted to reduce them to, something pleasant but forgettable, like the pastel mints served at reception tables. I pushed the list aside and began playing pieces I loved, challenging works by Chopin, Liszt, and Beethoven. My fingers stumbled at first over passages that had once been fluid, but each day they remembered more, responded better, connected more deeply with the music. During one practice session, a thought occurred to me that stopped my playing mid-phrase. What if I didn't follow my mother's script? What if I played something else entirely? Something that showcased what I could really do? The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. I imagined the faces of the wedding guests, expecting background noise, and receiving a genuine performance instead. I imagined my mother's expression, her careful planning disrupted. I imagined Cassandra, who had once, in a rare moment of sisterly connection, admired my playing. But what would I perform? The standard classical repertoire felt insufficient for what I wanted to express. I needed something personal, something that carried the weight of my experience. That night, I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I began to compose, starting with a simple melody that had been playing in my head for years. I built upon it, adding harmonies, counterpoint, emotional shifts that reflected my journey away from and back to music. The composition took shape over the following weeks. I would come home from my accounting job and sit at the piano until midnight, working through passages, refining transitions, building toward an emotional climax that felt both cathartic and revelatory. During this time, I received several texts from my mother asking about my preparation for the wedding. I responded with vague assurances, never mentioning my departure from her approved playlist. She seemed satisfied with my compliance, which only strengthened my resolve to surprise her. 2 weeks before the wedding, I called my old friend Emma, the only person from my youth who had understood my complicated relationship with music and my mother. "I can't believe you're playing at Cassandra's wedding," Emma said when I told her. "Your mother has some nerve." "I know," I sighed, "but I'm thinking of turning the tables a bit." I explained my plan to perform my original composition, rather than the bland selections my mother had chosen. "That's either the bravest or craziest thing I've ever heard," Emma laughed. "But I think you should do it. This isn't just about getting back at your mother, Audrey. It's about reclaiming something that was taken from you." "What if I mess up?" the old fear surfaced. "What if I freeze like I did at that competition?" "You're not 16 anymore," Emma said gently. "You're not playing for judges or for your mother's approval. You're playing for yourself, to tell your story. That makes all the difference." After hanging up, I returned to the piano with renewed purpose. This performance wouldn't be about perfection or meeting external standards. It would be about truth, about translating my experience into sound, about turning years of pain into something beautiful. As the wedding approached, I experienced nightmares reminiscent of those from my competition days. In one, I sat at the piano, but my fingers were frozen solid. In another, the keys melted away as I tried to play. I would wake up breathless, doubting my decision. Yet each morning, I returned to practice with determination. The piece evolved as I worked, becoming more nuanced, more honest. It began with hesitant, simple notes that evoked childhood, moved through turbulent passages representing conflict and pressure, then dissolved into broken, discordant sections reflecting my breakdown and abandonment of music. But it didn't end there. It rebuilt from those fragments into something new, something that integrated the classical training of my youth with emotional maturity and self-acceptance. 3 days before the wedding, I performed the complete piece for the first time in my apartment, playing it from start to finish without stopping. When the final notes faded, I realized my face was wet with tears. The composition had become more than an act of rebellion. It was a conversation with my past self, an acknowledgement of both the damage done and the strength found. That night, I received a final email from my mother with logistical details about the wedding. "The cocktail hour will be from 5 to 6, she wrote. "The piano will be set up in the east corner of the terrace. Please dress appropriately, and remember to be punctual. The real entertainment begins at 6:30 with dinner and dancing." The real entertainment. Her words confirmed what I already knew, that in her eyes I was an afterthought, a practical solution to fill space. But for the first time, her dismissal didn't wound me as deeply. I had found something in these weeks of preparation that she couldn't diminish with her words, a connection to music that existed independently of her approval. The night before the wedding, I practiced one last time, then carefully printed out the sheet music to my composition, though I had memorized every note. I titled it simply, "Return." As I packed up my music and prepared my outfit for the wedding, I felt a strange calm replace the anxiety that had dominated my preparation. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would be playing as my authentic self for the first time in more than a decade. That alone was a victory no one could take from me. I arrived at Westbrook Gardens, the exclusive venue my mother had selected for Cassandra's wedding, 3 hours before the ceremony. The sprawling estate featured manicured grounds, a historic mansion, and a modern glass terrace overlooking a lake, where the reception would be held. Even at this early hour, the venue buzzed with activity as florists, caterers, and event staff executed my mother's meticulously planned vision. Following the instructions I'd received, I made my way to the bridal suite to check in before setting up at the piano. Outside the door, I paused, taking a deep breath before knocking. My mother answered, already dressed in her mother of the bride outfit, a champagne-colored dress that had probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair and makeup were impeccable, as though she, not Cassandra, was the day's main attraction. "Finally," she said, by way of greeting. "You were supposed to be here 20 minutes ago." "The email said 9:30, I replied, checking my watch. "It's 9:25. She waved away my response. "Never mind that now. You need to see where you'll be playing and make sure everything is set up correctly. The wedding planner has been absolutely useless about the musical arrangements." Inside the suite, Cassandra sat in front of a mirror while a stylist worked on her hair. Our eyes met in the reflection, and she gave me a small smile. "Hey," she said, "you made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, surprised by the genuine warmth I felt. Despite everything, she was my sister, and this was her day. "Cassandra, don't move your head," the stylist admonished gently. "These curls are delicate." "Sorry," my sister murmured, returning her gaze to her own reflection. My mother grabbed her wedding planner binder. "Come along, Audrey. Let me show you where you'll be playing." She led me through the venue to the glass terrace, where the cocktail hour would take place. The space was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the lake and gardens. Staff were arranging high top tables and setting up the bar stations. There, my mother pointed to a far corner, partially hidden behind a large floral arrangement. That's where they've put the piano. I stared at the baby grand, tucked away like an afterthought. It was a beautiful instrument, certainly, but its placement made it clear that the music was not meant to be a focal point. "Is there any way to move it?" I asked. "It's pretty hidden back there." My mother frowned. "It's perfect where it is. The music should enhance the atmosphere, not dominate it. You're providing ambiance, Audrey, not giving a concert." As she spoke, a staff member approached us. "Mrs. Davis, the florist has a question about the ceremony arch." "I'll be right there," my mother said before turning back to me. Get familiar with the piano. And remember, nothing flashy. As she walked away, I approached the instrument and lifted the lid. Despite its relegation to the corner, it was a Steinway, well-maintained and perfectly tuned. I ran my fingers lightly over the keys, testing their action. It responded beautifully, with a warm, rich tone that my digital piano at home couldn't match. I took out my sheet music and placed it on the stand, then sat down to play a few measures of my composition. The acoustics in the glass terrace were surprisingly good, the sound traveling clearly despite the space's size. As I played, a woman in an elegant navy dress approached, listening with evident appreciation. "That's lovely," she said when I paused. "Not the usual wedding fare." "Thank you," I replied, closing the piano lid. "Just warming up." "Are you the bride's friend?" "Sister, actually." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "How wonderful that you're sharing your talent on her special day. Are you a professional pianist?" "No," I said, the familiar twinge of what might have been passing through me. "I work in accounting." "What a shame," she commented. "You play beautifully." Before I could respond, I heard my mother's voice. "Patricia, there you are." I realized with a start that the woman was Richard's mother, whom I had met briefly at the dinner weeks ago. "Judith," Patricia nodded coolly. "Everything looks beautiful." "Thank you," my mother preened. "We wanted nothing but the best for Cassandra and Richard." She glanced at me. "I see you've met Audrey." "Yes, I was just complimenting her playing. You didn't mention she was so talented." My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Audrey had some training as a child. She'll be providing some light music during cocktail hour." "Light music," Patricia repeated, looking at me with new interest. "I see. Well, I look forward to hearing more later." As she walked away, my mother turned to me. "What were you playing just now? It didn't sound like anything from the list I sent you." "Just warming up?" I echoed my earlier response. She studied me for a moment, suspicion crossing her features, but another crisis with the table arrangements called her away before she could press further. Left alone, I explored the venue, eventually finding myself near the ceremony space where the string quartet was rehearsing. They were professional musicians from the city symphony, their playing precise and beautiful. I stood listening until the first violinist noticed me. "You must be the bride's sister," she said during their break. "The pianist, right?" I nodded, surprised to be recognized. "Your mother mentioned you," she explained. "Said you'd be playing some easy pieces during cocktail hour." Easy pieces. The dismissal stung, even coming secondhand. "That's right," I said, not bothering to correct her. "Well, don't worry about following us. We finish with the recessional, then we're off until dinner. The hour is all yours." I thanked her and continued wandering, eventually finding myself back at the bridal suite. The door was ajar, and I could hear Cassandra's voice, sounding uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I just wish Dad had stood up to her more about the guest list," she was saying to someone. "Half these people are her friends, not ours." I hesitated, not wanting to eavesdrop, but curious about this rare crack in my sister's perfect facade. "Sweetheart, you know your mother," came my father's voice. "She sees this wedding as a reflection on her." "It's supposed to be about Richard and me," Cassandra sighed. "Sometimes I think she's been planning this day since I was born, and I'm just the mannequin she gets to dress up." The parallel to my own experience with piano was striking. Had Cassandra also been performing to a script our mother had written? The thought that we might share this burden had never occurred to me. I knocked gently on the doorframe. "Can I come in?" Cassandra looked up, momentarily flustered. "Audrey, yes, come in." My father stood awkwardly by the window, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional conversation I had interrupted. "I should check on the parking situation," he mumbled, squeezing my shoulder as he passed. Alone with my sister, I wasn't sure what to say. We had existed in separate orbits for so long, assigned different roles in our family drama. "You look beautiful," I offered truthfully. Her dress was elegant and understated, her makeup enhancing rather than masking her features. "Thanks," she smiled. "Are you all set up for later?" I nodded. "The piano's beautiful, even if it is hidden in the corner." Cassandra rolled her eyes. "Mom insisted on that. Said people shouldn't be distracted from networking during cocktail hour." She hesitated, then added, "I wanted to ask you to play during the ceremony too, but she had already booked the quartet." This revelation surprised me. "You did?" "Of course," she said, adjusting her veil. "You were always the musical one in the family." "And you were always the perfect one," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Instead of being offended, Cassandra laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Perfect? God, Audrey, I've been trying to live up to impossible standards my entire life. Do you know how exhausting that is?" The question hung between us, a sudden bridge across years of misunderstanding. I did know, perhaps better than anyone. "Yes," I said simply, "I do." Our eyes met, and for a moment, I saw my sister clearly, perhaps for the first time, not as the golden child or my mother's ally, but as another daughter trying to navigate the treacherous waters of our mother's expectations. The moment was broken by a knock at the door. "15 minutes until we need you in position, Miss Davis," called the wedding coordinator. "I should go," I said, suddenly reluctant to leave this newfound connection. "Audrey," Cassandra called as I reached the door. "Play something beautiful today, okay? Something real." I smiled, my resolve strengthening. "I will, I promise." As I made my way back to the terrace to prepare for my performance, I passed my mother directing staff to rearrange a flower display. "There you are," she said, spotting me. "The coordinator wants to run through the timing. And I've told the sound technician to keep your microphone at a lower level, so don't worry about being too loud." A lower level. Another way to ensure I remained in the background. Unobtrusive. Forgettable. "Thanks," I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. Guests would begin arriving soon. In less than 2 hours, I would be sitting at that piano, facing a choice. The most significant musical decision I had made since walking off that competition stage 12 years ago. As I watched my mother continue her rounds, making minute adjustments to her perfect vision, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. I knew exactly what I would play. The ceremony went off without a hitch, each moment unfolding according to my mother's precise vision. Cassandra was radiant as she walked down the aisle on our father's arm, and even I felt a lump in my throat when she and Richard exchanged vows. Throughout it all, the string quartet provided the expected musical backdrop, their performance flawless but conventional. As guests moved from the garden ceremony space to the glass terrace for cocktail hour, I made my way to the piano tucked in its corner. My mother intercepted me, straightening my already straight dress collar. "Remember, nothing too complicated," she instructed. "People will be talking, networking, just provide a pleasant atmosphere." "I understand," I replied, my external calm belying the storm of emotions beneath. She studied me for a moment, perhaps sensing something in my tone, then added, "After the first 30 minutes, the string quartet will join for background music during dinner. You'll be done then." With a final appraising look, she moved away to direct guests toward the bar. I watched her go, noting how she seemed to glow with satisfaction as several attendees complimented her on the beautiful ceremony. I took my seat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed my composition on the stand, though I knew it by heart. The cocktail hour was beginning, waiters circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvre, guests mingling in their formal attire, largely ignoring the piano in the corner, exactly as my mother had planned. I began with a simple Chopin nocturne, something gentle and familiar that wouldn't disrupt the carefully crafted atmosphere. As expected, no one paid much attention. I was, indeed, just background music, audible but not worthy of notice. After 15 minutes of playing standard pieces, I transitioned seamlessly into the beginning of my composition, Return. The opening was deliberately subtle, not announcing itself as different from what came before, notes falling like quiet raindrops, tentative and delicate. As I played through the first movement of my piece, I kept my eyes on the keys, focusing on the emotional truth of each passage. The music began to shift, growing more complex, harmonies deepening, the simple melody transforming into something richer, more urgent. I glanced up briefly and noticed a few guests had paused in their conversations, cocktails held mid-air as they turned toward the piano. A small circle of space had cleared around me, people unconsciously moving closer to listen. Encouraged, I leaned into the music, allowing my fingers to press more firmly, the volume increasing naturally with the piece's intensity. The second movement flowed into turbulent arpeggios and dramatic chord progressions that embodied the conflict and pressure of my teenage years. More heads turned. The ambient noise of conversation began to dim. From the corner of my eye, I saw the wedding coordinator whisper something to a waiter, who hurried off, presumably to find my mother. I didn't care. I was fully immersed now, playing the breakdown section where the music fragmented into discordant patterns before slowly rebuilding. My body swayed with the emotional current of the piece, my hands flying across the keys with a freedom I hadn't felt in years. The terrace had grown remarkably quiet. I risked another glance up and was startled to see that a crowd had gathered around the piano, cocktails forgotten, all eyes on me. Among them stood Patricia, Richard's mother, watching with undisguised admiration. I caught sight of my mother pushing through the crowd, her expression a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. Our eyes met briefly before I returned my focus to the music, now building toward its climax. This was the heart of the composition, where pain transformed into strength, where brokenness reassembled into something new and authentic. My fingers danced across the keys, drawing sounds from the Steinway that filled the glass terrace, resonating off the windows, surrounding the guests in waves of emotion. I was vaguely aware of tears on my cheeks but made no move to wipe them away. The music spoke what words never could, about loss and rediscovery, about having your passion turned against you and then reclaiming it on your own terms. As I approached the final movement, I saw Cassandra and Richard standing at the edge of the crowd, her hand gripping his arm, her expression open with wonder. Beside them, my father watched with what looked like dawning recognition, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. And then there was my mother, her face drained of color, her carefully constructed control visibly slipping as she realized what was happening. Her background music had become the main event, stealing focus from her perfect orchestration of the day. The final section of my composition was a resolution, not a simple return to the beginning, but an evolution of it. The original childlike melody now informed by experience, both painful and transformative. The notes rang out clear and true, no longer asking for approval, but offering a gift to those willing to receive it. When I played the final chord, letting it fade gently into silence, the terrace remained absolutely still for one breathless moment. Then came the applause, starting with a single person and quickly spreading until the space filled with it, thunderous and spontaneous. I stood shakily, overwhelmed by the response. People I'd never met approached the piano, offering congratulations and asking about the beautiful piece I'd played. Someone pressed a business card into my hand, mentioning a gallery opening that needed a pianist. Through the crowd, I saw my mother standing rigidly by the bar, her smile fixed and false as she spoke to a guest who was gesturing enthusiastically toward me. Even from a distance, I could see the tight line of her shoulders, the barely contained fury beneath her social veneer. Cassandra broke through the crowd and embraced me, something she hadn't done in years. "That was incredible," she whispered. "You stole the show." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "I didn't mean to take attention from your day." She pulled back, laughing. "Are you kidding? That was the most genuine thing that's happened in this entire wedding circus." She squeezed my hands. "What was that piece? I've never heard it before." "I wrote it," I admitted. "It's called Return." Her eyes widened. "You composed that?" Audrey, that's amazing. Before I could respond, Richard joined us, bringing his mother along. That was extraordinary, Patricia said, her earlier assessment confirmed. Richard told me you were talented, but I had no idea. Thank you, I managed, still processing the overwhelming response. Do you have a card? She continued. I chair the Arts Foundation board, and we're always looking for new talent for our fundraising events. As I fumbled through an explanation of my accounting career and recent return to music, I saw my mother finally approaching, her social smile firmly in place, though her eyes were cold. Wasn't that lovely? She said, her voice tight. Such a surprise. Audrey, the coordinator needs you to wrap up now. The string quartet is ready for dinner music. Actually, Patricia interjected smoothly, I was just telling Audrey how much I'd love to hear more during dinner. That quartet can play any time, but this was special. My mother's smile froze. Oh, but we've already arranged the schedule. The quartet is contracted for dinner. I'm sure they wouldn't mind a short break, Richard suggested, supportive of his mother's interest. Audrey could play during the salad course, perhaps? Caught between her desire to control the event and her inability to refuse her new in-laws, my mother hesitated just long enough for Cassandra to step in. I think that's a wonderful idea, my sister declared. It's my wedding, after all, and I'd love to hear my sister play again. My mother had no choice but to acquiesce. Of course, dear. Whatever you want. As guests were directed toward their dinner tables, I found myself in the unexpected position of being moved from the corner to a more central location for my additional performance. The string quartet, professional to the core, graciously adjusted their schedule. Through it all, I felt a sense of vindication that went beyond proving my mother wrong. I had reconnected with a part of myself I thought was lost forever, and in doing so, had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. When I sat down to play again during dinner, it was with the confidence of someone who had finally found her voice. And as my music filled the reception hall, I noticed my mother watching from the side, her expression a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. But chief among them seemed to be the dawning realization that she could no longer define me by my past failures. For the first time in my adult life, I played not as the daughter who had disappointed, but as Audrey, the pianist who had something genuine to say. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. After my second performance during dinner, I was no longer invisible, no longer just Cassandra's sister or background entertainment. Guests approached me throughout the evening, asking about my music, my training, whether I performed regularly. You should be on stage, one of Richard's colleagues insisted, pressing his business card into my hand. My brother runs a music venue downtown. He's always looking for fresh talent. I collected more business cards that evening than I had in my entire accounting career, tucking them into my clutch with a mixture of disbelief and cautious excitement. Each one represented a possible future I had long ago abandoned. As the night progressed, I noticed my mother maintaining her distance, circulating among guests with her practiced smile, deflecting compliments about my performance with vague acknowledgments before steering conversations back to the wedding details she had orchestrated. Near the end of the evening, as the dancing wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself alone by the dessert table when my mother finally approached. Her smile had vanished, replaced by the tight-lipped expression I knew all too well. "What exactly was that?" she asked without preamble, her voice low but sharp. "I played the piano," I replied evenly. "Isn't that what you wanted?" "You know perfectly well that's not what I meant. You deliberately upstaged your sister at her own wedding." "Did I?" I kept my tone calm. Cassandra seemed to enjoy it. "Of course she said that. She's too polite to tell you how inappropriate your little performance was." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her dress. "I gave you simple instructions. Pleasant background music, nothing showy or attention-seeking. Instead, you turned cocktail hour into your personal concert." The familiar pattern was unfolding. My mother rewriting reality to fit her narrative, positioning me as the selfish one, the problem, the disappointment. But something had changed within me during those moments at the piano. I could see the manipulation clearly now, and it no longer had power over me. "Mom," I said quietly, "you put me in that corner to humiliate me. You called me background music and told everyone I would play easy pieces. You wanted to remind me and everyone else of my failure." Her eyes widened slightly, unused to direct confrontation from me. "That's ridiculous. I was giving you an opportunity to contribute." "No," I shook my head. "You were putting me in my place, the same way you've been doing since I was 16. Is that what this was about? Some delayed teenage rebellion?" She glanced around to ensure no one was witnessing our exchange. "After everything I sacrificed for your musical education, this is how you repay me? By embarrassing me in front of everyone?" "I didn't play to embarrass you," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. "I played for me, because I needed to remember who I am." "And who is that? Exactly. The girl who choked under pressure? Who threw away years of training and investment?" The words were designed to wound, to return me to that 16-year-old girl frozen on stage, but they couldn't reach me anymore. "I'm a pianist who stopped playing to please others and started playing to express myself," I answered. "And I'm sorry if that doesn't fit into your perfect vision of this wedding or our family." She stared at me, momentarily speechless, unused to this version of her usually compliant younger daughter. "Is everything okay?" Cassandra's voice broke the tension as she joined us, still radiant in her wedding dress despite the long day. "Everything's fine." Our mother recovered quickly. "I was just telling Audrey how lovely her playing was." Cassandra looked between us, clearly not believing the lie but unwilling to challenge it directly. "Well, I thought it was incredible. Everyone's been talking about it." "That's nice, dear." Our mother patted her arm. "But it's your day. You should be the one everyone's talking about." "Mom," Cassandra sighed, "I've had plenty of attention. I'm happy for Audrey to have some too." A flash of something, perhaps genuine hurt, crossed our mother's face. "I only wanted your wedding to be perfect." "It was beautiful," Cassandra assured her. "You did an amazing job with everything. But the best part was Audrey's music. It felt real in a way the rest of this production hasn't." Before our mother could respond, Richard appeared, informing Cassandra it was time for their grand exit. She squeezed my hand before leaving, whispering, "We'll talk soon." Left alone again with my mother, I expected her to continue our confrontation, but instead, she seemed suddenly deflated. "Your father wants to leave soon," she said stiffly. "Will you be all right getting home?" "I'll be fine," I assured her, recognizing the conversation was over for now. As she walked away, my father approached, having observed our exchange from a distance. "That was quite something today," he said, his voice gentle in a way it rarely was when discussing anything related to my music. "Thanks, Dad." He hesitated, then added, "I should have stepped in more, over the years, with your mother, with the pressure she put on you." The acknowledgement, so long overdue, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Why didn't you?" He looked away, watching my mother direct the cleanup crew with diminished energy. I told myself she knew best when it came to raising daughters, that her methods were harsh but effective. He sighed. "And the truth is, it was easier to go along than to challenge her." "It was hard," I admitted, being the one who always disappointed her. "You never disappointed me," he said quietly. "I was always proud of you, Audrey. I just never said it enough." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of years of unspoken words between us. "You're playing tonight," he finally continued. "It reminded me of why you loved music in the first place, before all the competitions and pressure. It was alive." "It felt alive," I agreed, for the first time in a long time. "Don't stop again," he said, surprising me with the directness of his request. "Whatever happens with your mother, with your job, don't give it up again." As the evening drew to a close, I found myself sitting alone at the now empty piano, running my fingers lightly over the keys that had helped me reclaim a part of myself I thought was lost forever. The venue staff worked around me, breaking down tables and collecting centerpieces, but allowed me this final moment with the instrument. I played a few quiet notes, already missing the feeling of being fully connected to the music, to myself. Today had changed something fundamental, shifted the ground beneath my feet. I wasn't sure what would come next, what conversations awaited with my mother, what opportunities might arise from the business cards in my purse, but I knew with certainty that music would be part of it. As I finally stood to leave, one of the catering staff approached. "My sister was here earlier," she said shyly. "She took a video of you playing that made me cry when she showed me. She said you wrote it yourself." I nodded, touched by this unexpected connection. "Well," she continued, "I just wanted to say thank you. It was beautiful." Her simple appreciation, free from the complicated history and expectations that had defined my relationship with music, felt like the perfect conclusion to this transformative day. Driving home in the quiet of early morning, I felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The confrontation with my mother wasn't fully resolved, and years of complicated family dynamics couldn't be healed in a single evening, but something had shifted. I had found my voice again, not just musically, but personally, and that was a beginning worth celebrating. In the days following Cassandra's wedding, I existed in a strange limbo. I returned to my accounting office, filed reports, attended meetings, but it all felt distant, as if I were watching someone else go through the motions. The only thing that felt real was the time I spent at my piano each evening, expanding on the composition I had played at the wedding, exploring new musical ideas with a freedom I hadn't allowed myself in years. A week after the wedding, Cassandra called from her honeymoon in Greece. "I'm still getting messages about your performance," she told me, the sound of ocean waves in the background. "Patricia is practically your personal PR agent now." I laughed. "She's already emailed me twice about playing at the Arts Foundation Gala in the fall." "You should do it," Cassandra said. "You're wasted in that accounting firm." "It's not that simple," I replied, though part of me wondered if perhaps it could be. "By the way," she added, before hanging up, "Mom hasn't said anything directly, but I can tell she's still processing what happened. Give her time." Time was exactly what I needed as well. I scheduled my first therapy session in years, recognizing that my relationship with music was inextricably linked to my relationship with my mother, and both needed careful examination if I was to move forward in a healthy way. "Your performance at the wedding was an act of reclamation," my therapist observed during our third session. "You took back not just your music, but your narrative." It felt like breathing again after being underwater for years, I admitted. "And how do you want to proceed now? With your music? With your mother?" That was the question I wrestled with daily. 2 weeks after the wedding, I finally reached out to my mother, suggesting we meet for lunch. She agreed with surprising readiness. We selected a neutral location, a cafe midway between our homes. When I arrived, she was already seated, looking smaller somehow, less formidable than the woman who had dominated my childhood. "You look well," she said after we ordered, her voice lacking its usual critical edge. "Thanks," I replied, unsure how to navigate this unfamiliar territory. "How have you been?" "Busy with thank you cards. The wedding photos came back yesterday." She hesitated. "There's a lovely one of you at the piano. I've set it aside for you." The simple gesture caught me off guard. "I'd like that." We fell into silence, years of complicated history sitting between us like an uninvited guest. "Your father tells me you've been playing again," she finally said. I nodded. "Every day." "That piece you performed, you wrote it yourself?" "Yes," I admitted, watching her carefully. "I called it Return." Something flickered across her face, too quick to identify. It was impressive, not what I expected. Coming from my mother, this qualified as effusive praise. I felt a small weight lift from my shoulders. "Mom," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I need to ask you something. When you insisted I play at the wedding, was it really just about saving money on musicians? Or was it about reminding me of my failure? Her hand tightened around her water glass. I expected denial, deflection, or anger, the usual responses whenever I questioned her motives. Instead, she surprised me. "I don't know," she said quietly. "Maybe both. Maybe neither." She looked up at me, her expression more vulnerable than I could ever remember seeing it. "When you stopped playing, it felt like you were rejecting everything I had tried to give you." "It wasn't about rejecting you," I said gently. "It was about surviving. Your expectations were crushing me." She flinched slightly but didn't argue. "I wanted you to succeed where I couldn't. I thought pushing you would make you stronger." It nearly broke me. We sat with that truth between us, neither rushing to fill the uncomfortable space it created. "I never understood why you quit," she finally continued. "You had such extraordinary talent." "The joy was gone," I explained. "Music became about perfection, about your approval, about not disappointing you. It wasn't mine anymore." She considered this, turning her coffee cup slowly. "And now?" "Now it's mine again," I said simply. "I play because I want to, because it helps me express things I can't put into words." "Like at the wedding." I nodded. "Exactly like that." My mother took a deep breath. "I saw Richard's mother yesterday at her book club. She couldn't stop talking about you, about how you should be performing professionally." A hint of her old competitiveness surfaced. She asked if you had an agent. I couldn't help but smile. "I'm not looking for an agent, Mom. I'm just rediscovering something I love." "Well," she sniffed, "Patricia thinks you're wasting your talent at that accounting firm." Surprisingly, I found myself laughing. For once, we might all agree on something. The lunch ended without dramatic reconciliation or complete resolution, but it was a beginning. We had spoken more honestly than we had in years, acknowledging hurts without inflicting new ones. It was progress, the first tentative steps toward a different kind of relationship. Over the following months, I continued my therapy, gradually untangling the complex web of expectations, perfectionism, and self-doubt that had defined my relationship with music. I accepted Patricia's invitation to play at the Arts Foundation Gala, my first public performance since the wedding. My mother attended, sitting stiffly in the audience but applauding sincerely when I finished. I started teaching piano to adults in the evenings, finding unexpected fulfillment in helping others connect with music without the pressure of perfection. Some of my students were beginners, others returning to the instrument after years away, all of them approaching the piano with a mixture of trepidation and hope that felt deeply familiar. 6 months after the wedding, I took the leap I had been contemplating since that transformative day, resigning from my accounting position to pursue music full-time. It wasn't an easy decision, trading security for passion, but it felt right in a way few decisions in my life had. Cassandra supported me wholeheartedly, even offering financial assistance that I politely declined. Our relationship had transformed too, the old rivalry giving way to a genuine appreciation of each other's strengths and struggles. "You know," she told me during a rare sisters-only dinner, "watching you play at my wedding made me realize something. I've spent my whole life doing what was expected, checking boxes, being perfect. But I've never had anything that was truly mine, something I loved the way you love music." "It's never too late to find it," I encouraged her. My father, true to his word at the wedding, became my unexpected champion, attending every performance, sitting in the front row with an expression of undisguised pride. "I always knew you'd find your way back to it," he told me, after a particularly successful concert. My mother's journey was more complicated. Old habits died hard, and she still occasionally slipped into critical comments or attempted to direct my musical choices. But there were moments of genuine connection, too, like when she unearthed my childhood music books from the attic or reluctantly shared stories of her own brief career as a pianist. "I was never as good as you," she admitted one evening after hearing me practice a particularly challenging piece. Not even close. The admission, so simple, yet so profound, helped me understand her better than years of conflict had. Her perfectionism, her pushing, her living vicariously through my achievements, all stemmed from her own sense of inadequacy, her own unfulfilled dreams. Understanding didn't erase the damage done, but it made forgiveness possible, a forgiveness that was as much for me as for her. A year after Cassandra's wedding, I released my first album of original compositions, with Return as the title track. The critical response was positive, the commercial success modest but encouraging. What mattered most was the sense of completion, of having transformed a moment meant to humiliate me into something lasting and meaningful. At my album release concert, I dedicated the final piece to my family, all present in the front row. "This is for those who shaped me, for better and for worse," I said from the stage, for teaching me that sometimes the longest journey is finding your way back to yourself. As my fingers touched the keys, I felt none of the anxiety that had once paralyzed me, only the pure connection between artist and instrument, between emotion and expression. The music flowed through me, honest and imperfect and alive. In that moment, I understood that healing isn't about erasing the past or forgetting the pain, but about integrating it into a larger story, one where trauma doesn't have the final word. My mother had forced me to play at my sister's wedding to remind me of my place, but instead, I had found my voice. The music that was meant to keep me in the background had brought me center stage, not just literally, but in my own life. The journey wasn't over. The relationship with my mother still complicated, the path forward not always clear. But the silence that had defined so much of my life had been broken, replaced by melodies of my own making, played not for approval or perfection, but for the simple, profound joy of being heard. Have you ever had a moment when something meant to diminish you became the catalyst for reclaiming your power? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of rediscovering passion after years of silence resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more authentic stories of transformation. Thank you for listening to my story today. And remember that it's never too late to return to what makes your soul sing. Share this with someone who might need to be reminded of their own forgotten talents. Until next time, keep playing your own music, whatever form it takes.